Hey, it's Hunt. You found Hunt on Saints. We're talking black and gold football. Do us a favor. Hit the like button, share your comments below, and hit that subscription button so you can get all of our content. Enjoy. Sean, you have the Overtime podcast over there at Fox 8, and I was giving it a listen earlier today, and y'all were evaluating Derek Carr through his first 10 games as the quarterback of the Saints. How would you assess his play thus far?
He's been very Derek Carr. He's been average. He's been an average player through 10 games. He's been a guy who, you check his stats, he'll fall somewhere. All the major passing stats somewhere between 12 and 19 in most of the stats. Passing yards, touchdowns, completion percentage, rating, QBR, those types of things. Only thing he's in the top five in is the interceptions thrown. He has taken care of the ball, but I think at the expense of some plays that could have been made downfield in certain situations. So I think overall he's been his stats match that of a team that's 5-5. I think that he's been a very 5-5 quarterback. That's just through 10 games. That's my honest assessment of where Derek Carr currently stands.
Is there reason to believe that he, who's played more football than he will play in the future, very likely will improve upon that over the course of the next 7 games or the next 3 years?
Marginally better. I think they were finding themselves a little bit between the Indianapolis and Chicago stretch, but the team has had trouble dealing with any kind of success this season. They tend to fall right back to their sort of this natural ability to be average. So I think they can get marginally better in certain areas when it comes to improvement of his play overall. I think there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to the offense that haven't gotten in sync. It's always seemed a little bit disjointed, and I don't think there's any reason to believe it would all of a sudden just come together and be the smooth, efficient shop that they had hoped for. But marginal improvement is certainly possible, and marginal improvement, as sad as it sounds, might be enough to get you to 9-8 and win the NFC South and get into the playoffs. Not just get into the playoffs, but host a playoff game, which would be remarkable given the just the around 500 nature this team has had throughout the 2023 season.
We know the offensive line had massive issues in September and October, injuries and play both. Would you suggest that they've kind of leveled out there and have solidified some things?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the formula going forward. I think they've done enough to solidify things, especially when it comes to pass protection. I think they slid a little bit against Minnesota. I think Brian Flores' exotic looks got to them a little bit, and I don't think we talked about that quite enough in our analysis of the Saints-Vikings loss. But I do think for the most part that 3-4, 5-game stretch with this combination, they've been able to solidify themselves, and that's going to be the formula going forward. That's the top 5. That's the best 5 going forward. They have taken a small dip when it comes to running the football, although against Minnesota they were able to run the ball effectively. Again, sometimes those exotic type defenses, they'll give those types of plays up. But I do think overall this is your best 5. That's probably the way, barring injury, of course, the way they'll keep going throughout the rest of the season.
If I were to give you like a multiple choice as to if the Saints offense is going to find far more consistency after the bye week, is it more likely that's because Derek Carr plays better, because they find a more traditional run game, because Taysom Hill is more involved? What would be the most likely scenario that would help the Saints offense moving forward?
Honestly, I think the Taysom Hill situation that happened Sunday, it was uncalled for. He should have gotten the ball more. But for the most part, he's been pretty heavily involved, at least over the last 3 or 4 game stretch. Again, I think Derek Carr is who he is. He might have marginal improvement. I honestly think the traditional run game needs to improve, and I think there's more there. I think that's the one area, if you really were to look at it and say, okay, where's the area they can realistically improve from where they've been that could realistically help push them over the edge in terms of just getting that little bump that they need to find some form of consistency. That would be it. You look at Alvin Kamara, there's been flashes there, but he hasn't necessarily broke off the big one yet. You talk about, the rookie Kendre Miller's battling injuries. Jamal Williams is a nice addition, but I don't think he's the type that's going to give you any sort of explosive playmaking ability running the football. So if that would probably be the most tangible thing. If they could somehow get the traditional run game going with Kamara, whatever this mixture of backs that they have, combined with the usage of Taysom Hill. We've all seen the stat out there when he rushes for over 7 attempts in a game. And then I think Derek Carr is going to be pretty similar to what he's been. He's not going to be great. He's not going to be terrible. He's going to be kind of in the middle. So if you get a little bit of that, I think you can see a little bit more consistency in this offense.
Chatting with Sean Fazende, Fox 8 Sports down in New Orleans. Defensive side of the ball, that stretch where they weren't allowing 20 was really remarkable in this day and age in the NFL, but it's slipped a little bit since then. What have you seen in the Saints defense over the last month?
Yeah, it's been a struggle, and they've started to level off, and it's very, very, very concerning. They seem to start getting to dig themselves into holes very early in games. They've been able to offset that, like, for instance, against Chicago with, the 5 takeaways, and they've been able to take the ball away, which is great, but they didn't get one in Minnesota, obviously. I honestly think it starts up front. I think the regression up there, it's almost like it's flipped. Early in the season, the line of scrimmage on the offensive side of the ball was the biggest concern. And about 5 or 6 games in, I thought that flipped. That line of scrimmage concern flips to the defensive side of the ball. You're not getting much pressure. Other than Carl Granderson and flashes of Brian Brzee, you're just not seeing the playmaking ability up front. And I think that's an issue that was an issue going into camp. It was an issue coming out of camp. It looked like they had solved it the first part of the season, but it looks like over the last few weeks now, that's been a real problem, and I'm not sure what the solution is to that because it all starts up front.
Obviously, there's some injuries up front on the defensive line. They bring in Jason PierrePaul. Is that purely a depth player? Can he help?
Yes, to both. I think
Okay.
he can. I think he's going to be a guy they're going to see what he has, see if he can blend in. One of those, hey, it can't hurt. We got to try something here to get some kind of juice in our pass rush, some kind of juice up front at the line of scrimmage. He's got, look, he's 34 years old. He's played some good ball in his career, but we'll see how much gas he has left in the tank. But this is a guy that if he can work his way into rotation, great. If not, it was a pretty low risk signing. So I guess we'll see what he's able to do. But I think it is a sign of just how frankly desperate they are to get some kind of life up front, some kind of pass rush up front to help this defense that's been on the slide. And it's part of the formula that frankly no one thought would be the issue. The defense being great was always part of the formula. The defense slipping to where they've been average the last couple of weeks, and hell, even bad in some spots. That's the part of the formula no one was expecting. I think it's throwing for a loop a little bit.
How big a loss is Marshon Latimore?
I think it's big because he's a guy that his presence allows everyone else in that secondary to play a little freer, to play with a little more confidence because he's such a lockdown guy. And I think of the 3 guys that got injured Sunday, talk about Carr, Mike T, and Latimore, he's the one I worry about the most in terms of the absence as far as how much time he's going to miss. They've got some depth there, and we saw some good things from Ike Yadam when he was on the field. We'll see what Alontae Taylor does. Does he go outside and stay inside? But I do think there's no replacing Marshon Latimore. Good thing is Adebo has stepped up, but he stepped up with Latimore opposite of him. If he's got to be the main guy, I'd be very curious to see where he's standing.
We've talked about what the Saints need to do to improve on both sides of the ball. And if they do that and they win 11 or 12 games and win the division, like everything's going to be fine. What if it goes the other way and the Saints finish this thing 2 games under 500 and the Falcons win the division? What are we looking at here?
I think you're going to see some major changes if somehow they come out of this with that schedule and frankly the good luck they've had, the good fortune they've had with the opposing quarterbacks they've had to face week in and week out, and somehow they end up 7-10 again. You're going to see some major changes, and I would think in that scenario, you would have to take a hard look at the head coach in that scenario as well. It's never generally been the Benson sort of way to kind of cut bait quickly when it comes to a head coach, especially under the Bensons. If you just look at their track record, other than Mike Ditka, they have never done that. But given where they stand, given the investment that they've made, and given just the circumstances that worked in their favor this year, like I said, with the scheduling and the injuries to other teams and the relative health of your team, that would be a huge disappointment, and you would see, at the very least, major coaching staff changes, if not the head coach, a lot on that staff being changed as well, which still could come even if they win the division.
What's the temperature of the city right now on the Saints?
It's just kind of whatever. It's kind of they're disappointed, and I think they've kind of expect the mediocre play, and when that happens, the next step is apathy. When apathy sets in, that's when it starts to show up in ticket sales and viewership and that sort of thing. And that is what would get ownership's attention, and whether or not they would need a change and start doing things differently if that were to happen. We've got some time left, but right now I would say there's definitely a sort of whatever type feel to the Saints right now within the fan base.
What does your gut tell you about how the Saints finish this thing up?
I just based off of what they've shown, based off of what's ahead, based off of how they've handled both success and failure this season, I think they finish this thing out 9-8, and somehow, some way, end up winning the NFC South and hosting a playoff game. Which some would not like that because it wouldn't force any change, but I just think, given the way it's gone and what they currently have available, I just think you're looking at a 9-8 ball club. And how about that? NFC South champions, which would be something else, wouldn't it?
Sure would. Sean, we appreciate some time.
Yep. Thanks.
He is Sean Fazende from Fox 8 down in New Orleans, at Sean Fazende Fox 8 on Twitter. You know, that's the interesting thing to me. I've never lived in New Orleans, but I've spent a lot of time down there. When I started a career in insurance down there, I was there 5 days a week and then coming back to Baton Rouge on the weekends. But that city adores its Saints. Now, Drew was there at this point, and all was happy-go-lucky, so I get it. But when you start to lose that, it's hard to come back from that in that regime. It's just hard. And Sean's correct. The Bensons have not been a knee-jerk reaction franchise. They have not. But they did tell Stan Van Gundy to kick bricks after 1 year. Like, that's a different franchise, but it's the same ownership group. And so that's the fight that Dennis Allen is up against. And it's an every single Sunday thing for him the next 6-7 weeks. Hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.